The Flannan Isles lighthouse mystery. 3 men were sent to a remote Scottish island to keep a lighthouse burning. Then one day, they disappeared. No bodies were found, no survivors were ever seen. And when rescuers finally reached the lighthouse, the strangest thing was not what they found, it was what was missing: the 3 men. The Flannan Isles are a group of remote, rocky islands off the west coast of Scotland. One of them, Eilean Mòr, rises dramatically from the Atlantic. At its highest point stands a white lighthouse built in the late 19th century to protect ships navigating the dangerous waters around the Outer Hebrides. In 1900, 3 men were stationed there.
James Ducat was the principal keeper, Thomas Marshall was the second assistant, and Donald McArthur was serving as the occasional keeper. Their job was simple in theory: keep the light operating, maintain the equipment, watch the weather, and survive the isolation. There was no radio communication connecting the lighthouse directly with the mainland. If something went wrong, there was no way to simply call for help. The men were largely on their own. On December 7, 1900, the keepers were relieved. The 3 men remained on the island. Then came December 15th. A steamship passing the Flannan Isles noticed something strange. The lighthouse light was not visible.
But the information did not immediately reach the Northern Lighthouse Board. Days passed. Then, on December 26th, the lighthouse relief vessel Hesperus arrived. The crew expected to see the usual signals from the keepers. Instead, there was silence. No one came to meet them. The ship sounded its whistle. There was no response. A rocket was fired toward the island. Still nothing. Eventually, relief keeper Joseph Moore was sent ashore. He climbed toward the lighthouse and found no one. The entrance gate and outside doors were closed. The beds were empty. There was no fire burning. The station appeared deserted. 3 lighthouse keepers had vanished. Moore searched the station again. Nothing.
No sign of the men, no explanation. But the investigation soon revealed something even more disturbing. The western landing area had been damaged. Ropes and equipment had been washed out.
Railings had been torn from their foundations. A crane railing had been damaged, and equipment normally stored near the landing was scattered across the rocks. The Atlantic had clearly been violent. The investigators began reconstructing what might have happened. The most likely explanation was not murder, it was the sea. The men may have gone down toward the western landing to secure equipment or inspect damage during severe weather. If one of them was struck by a large wave, the other 2 may have rushed to help, and another wave could have swept all 3 into the sea. It would only have taken seconds, and there would be no one left to raise the alarm. There was another clue.
The clothing found at the station suggested that at least 2 of the men may have gone outside prepared for bad weather. James Ducat's waterproof coat was missing. Thomas Marshall had his sea boots and oilskins, but Donald McArthur's usual coat had been left behind. That detail has fueled speculation for more than a century. Why would one man go outside in such conditions without his normal coat? Perhaps he rushed out after hearing the others. Perhaps the emergency developed so quickly that there was no time to dress properly. Or perhaps something else happened. We simply don't know. And that is where the facts end and the legends begin.
Over the decades, stories appeared claiming that the men had fought with each other. Others imagined pirates, murderers, supernatural creatures, or even bizarre explanations involving the remote island itself. But none of those theories has been proven. The Northern Lighthouse Board's own historical account remains much more cautious. The official conclusion was that the men most likely went out to deal with storm damage and were swept into the sea by an unexpected large wave. The evidence on the island supports that possibility. The damaged railings, the missing ropes, the scattered equipment, the violent weather, and the fact that the men were never seen again.
But there is one thing we can never reconstruct: their final moments. We don't know exactly why they went outside. We don't know who went first. We don't know whether one man was swept away and the others tried to rescue him.
And we don't know whether they even realized how dangerous the sea had become. The lighthouse itself remained standing. The light could be restored. The station could be occupied again. But the 3 men were gone.
Their families were left without a definitive account of what happened, and the island became permanently connected to Britain's most enduring maritime mysteries. Today, the lighthouse still stands on Eilean Mòr. The station that once required men to live in isolation is now an automated light. But more than a century later, the disappearance of James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald McArthur still attracts speculation.
The popular version of the story often makes the mystery sound supernatural. The real story may be more terrifying precisely because it doesn't need anything supernatural. 3 men were living on an isolated island. A violent Atlantic storm struck. They went outside, and something happened in those few minutes that nobody survived to explain. Perhaps a wave took one man. Perhaps the others tried to help. Perhaps another wave took them all. Then the island became silent. For 11 days, nobody knew they were gone. And when the relief crew finally reached the lighthouse, they found a station that looked as though its keepers had simply vanished. 3 men, 1 isolated island.
One violent sea, and no final witness. The lighthouse remained, the light returned, but the men never did. More than 120 years later, we can examine the evidence. We can reconstruct the weather. We can inspect the damaged landing. We can read the reports, but we still cannot hear the final conversation that took place before the 3 keepers walked toward the sea. And perhaps that is why the mystery